Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Mama Genius Hub podcast/festival. Today, we are doing another wonderful festival interview. And I have to tell you, mamas, those of you out there that are a little hesitant or not sure about how you feel about the word sex, Virio is going to help take those myths away from you and really bring us into really figuring out our feminine powers and how to have that, especially maybe in a marriage where you might not have it anymore, or how to have those kind of conversations. And so we're going to try to debunk some of those myths today. So if you're thinking about that, you might want to stay tuned and join us in just a moment. Welcome to Mama Genius Hub podcast, where we support moms with big dreams, from entrepreneurship to personal aspirations. I'm your host, Michelle Kaiser, and I'm here to help you unlock your potential in all areas of life. Join us as we explore strategies for thriving in motherhood while pursuing the dreams, the key to actually unlocking your genius. Subscribe now and embark on a journey to realize your fullest potential. Sometimes it goes in and out. We'll make sure that works next time. So Virio is a pleasure coach and expert in the sacred femininity and sexuality. She is a mama and grandma with 15 years of teaching in public school systems and a master's in education. She's a critic of pleasure program. She brings lightness and fun to the often taboo subject of sexuality. Welcome to the Mama Genius Hub podcast, Virio. We're so excited to have you here.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here as well. Just so amazing that you've brought so many amazing experts, and I'm glad to jump on the train with you all at this time.
Oh, it's so fun. And I know that, before we even dive into the question, Vera was talking, and I hope you don't mind me sharing, but sometimes we need that self-care. And so the reason why Virio's on the last day is because she took some time for herself and spent some days. I'll let her tell about it later if she chooses to do so, but took some time just for herself. And sometimes we need that. And sometimes we need to learn that no is a complete sentence and that we need to take care of ourselves first. But I am grateful that she felt inclined, now that she had that time and space, to come join us today. So I'm so excited to have you, and just want to share that, to how the things, sometimes scheduling things like that happen, but it's really how it's meant to be, because now we have Virio in her full feminine power, ready to share her wisdom with us because her cup's full. And I'm so excited to do that. And I'm just going to dive right in and ask you, what is your why behind even wanting to do any of this?
Yeah, and thank you for just sort of naming that too. It actually made me cry. Um, it's still such a I just want to speak to that because it's such a pattern for us as women. I don't know if others can relate. Let me know below if you can. But we often, oh, and here comes the sun. The sun is rising here where I am right now, so hopefully that's okay. I hope it doesn't look too weird. Um, but I had a pattern. And it's still one I need to pay attention to, of overgiving, 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 putting everybody else first. And at this point in my life, I'm caregiving for an elderly parent, right? So when I'm now a grandma and I'm 62 years young, and so I went from caregiving children, now I'm a grandma, and now I'm also caregiving my mom. So it's this dance of we're like constantly caregivers as women. And I notice I still need to pay attention. So, yeah, I wanted to be part of the Mama Genius Festival sooner. And I realized, no, 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 that's going to just add too many balls in the air. And that was going to take me to that familiar burnout that I've done. And I was like, no, 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 no. So, yeah, I pulled back, did a lot of things to fill myself up, take care of my own needs, uh, and then joined here. So, yeah, that's just like such an important piece, such an important piece. Um, and that's a big piece of why I'm here. And sex is actually part of that. And I believe a big piece of it is redefining sex, which I'm going to be talking about later. But but sex is actually a big piece of self-care, which I had no idea. In that first marriage that I was part of, 17-year marriage, we were having sex once a month. By the research stats, that's actually sexless. And that's not actually filling our cups. That's actually not taking care of our health. And I had no idea up until like 7 years ago how important that sex was. And we, as a mom, when my sons were younger, most of the time, I'm going to be honest, I was too exhausted for sex. I was too tired. And I had no idea that sex would have actually nourished me, would actually have helped me to take care of my health. And so, I remember many times saying to my husband, and probably him saying to me as well, I am too tired. I am too tired. I'm just going to go to sleep. And sadly, I didn't find out till 7 years ago that that was not actually great. And it wasn't great for the marriage as well, right now. And that's not the reason I left the marriage. That doesn't really, um, won't support this conversation. But right now on our planet, we have 50% of marriages end in divorce. 65% of second marriages end in divorce. And what I didn't know is the number 6 reason is actually lack of intimacy. The number 3 is lack of communication, and we can't talk about it because it's such a taboo subject. We don't even know how to bring it up. We don't even know how to ask for what we want as women, and I didn't. I was one of those women. And then the number 1 reason for divorce is actually infidelity. So clearly, if we don't take care of the intimacy when it's number 6, and we don't bring intimacy or find a way to bring it in, get educated. I wasn't educated. I had no clue what to do. We were the blind leading the blind. It was very dissatisfying sex. And if we don't take care of it, we don't learn how to talk about it, face the discomfort, get some education, then often, somebody goes and thinks the path is it's greener on the other side of the fence, right? And it's not. It doesn't solve it, and it just makes things messier.
Well,
So
I have to say,
that's
I think even part of the
why I
reason
do my work.
I even wanted you as one of the speakers is because I have that discomfort around it too. I think the more that we start talking about and having these conversations, the more that we can open up with it. I mean, there's certain things that as women, sometimes we don't talk about. Sometimes we do talk about sex, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we talk about the money, not those things. And I kind of want this to be an open space where we can start having some more of when we feel that discomfort, like we find somewhere to have that comfortable conversation with each other first, then we can take that to our spouses or to whoever that conversation needs to go to. But here's a starting place to get out of that discomfort. And so,
Yeah, for sure. And if you're feeling uncomfortable, even that we're having this conversation right now, I just want to tell you you're pretty normal. It's sadly uncomfortable for most people. And I'm an introvert. I live in a cabin in northern Alberta, and it's there's something in me that is bigger than we were talking about fear earlier, right? There's something in me that's bigger than the fear because I still navigate shame around this every time I step into more speaking engagements because there is so much judgment around it. Um, and there's something bigger in me that I feel this moral responsibility to share and teach women what I didn't even know I didn't know. What I didn't even know I didn't know about my own female anatomy until I was 55 years old. 7 years ago, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, we need to know this." And you and I have had a conversation about mothers and daughters as well. Like, I wish I would have known this stuff when I was 10, 8, right? When I was younger, some pieces of it would have been so useful as a young girl, so I didn't have to continue this disconnect from my own body, my own temple. It would have saved me so much, so much. Um, so that's actually I want to share one piece that's a big piece for me. So kind of backtracking to your original question, why I'm doing this work, and this is taboo subject, and it's also can be traumatic. So just know that as you're listening here, and if you need to just unplug and check out, please do to take care of yourself. But my first sexual experience was being raped at 10 years old. And I didn't tell a single person. My parents were away traveling on a trip and they 5 kids. Like and they weren't single parents like Jackie is, and my parents farmed us all out into different relatives. And that's where I ended up being raped by a cousin. And I had nobody to tell. And by the time my mom came back, I didn't even know I didn't really even understand as a young 10-year-old what had happened. How do you and by then it was weeks later when my mom and dad came back. I never told a single person. until I was 21 years old, and I think sexual assault centers had just opened up, and I walked in. I don't even remember. All I remember is walking in and crying. That's all I remember about that experience. But somewhere around that time, I decided that no girl should ever have to feel unsafe in her body, and I decided I have to. Like, now that I know what I know, I have to teach this. I have the moral responsibility to teach this, even though it still scares me and I still have fear. It's like, I want little girls, young girls, women, moms to know what I didn't even know I didn't know, not only for themselves and their marriage, but for their daughters, so their daughters don't have to experience what I experienced. And then I had lots of trauma after, because I learned how to disconnect from my body. I learned how to disassociate to survive, and that's not a healthy place to be. Because then I had that pattern of attracting relationships where I got that same way, and it's not healthy, and it doesn't have to be that way. If young girls actually know their bodies and are sovereign in their bodies, they're and that was a new word for me, sovereign. It's like, we know our own bodies. They're my body. I get to say no. I own it. So that's why I'm passionate about this work. Is I want girls to feel safe in their bodies and their expression, and for no to be a complete sentence. And that the only way that can happen is if each girl knows her anatomy. And here's the reality: most moms, if they weren't taught how to have that conversation with their own daughters, they're uncomfortable, and we will transmit the discomfort that we have if we don't learn how to talk about this taboo subject. And those cycles will continue generation after generation after generation. And it's time for us to stop that. We got the hashtag Me Too, right? I think everybody was in some way, had some experience. May not have been full on rape. So you may not have been raped as a young girl, but I'll bet you had moments where you had sex without consent, or somebody, you didn't even know to say no, or you didn't know to say stop when it was painful or dissatisfying. I think I've been blessed to work with hundreds of women, and every single woman I've worked with, in our pleasure program, has said that they've had moments where they just sort of suffered in dissatisfying sex, or they didn't say no when they wanted to say no because they didn't have the power or know the words, how to communicate, how to ask for what they needed.
I'm just taking all that in right now. I'm just, first of all, thank you for having the strength to have these conversations, because you're right, it is discomforting, because that's what society tells us, that this is all in our discomfort. We shouldn't talk about these things. And I feel like part of that comes from that masculine dominance of us just wanting to be subjective to that. And how do we get into our own power? I love how you put it, that it's really about knowing your own body and teaching young girls just what is their body, what is the capabilities, what does their body have, how does it work, how does it function, why these things are happening, so we're not scared of it. I mean, even just you and I had the conversation about the first period and things like that, of girls just understanding the beauty of it and the things behind it, and not the fear anymore. I mean, even when we're talking about, we're like, our experiences was, let's hide it. This is shame because it's my time of the month. This is something that I'm supposed to hide. I'm supposed to like mask it with painkillers or whatever it is, so I don't show who I am. And I love that we're having this conversation, because we don't need to do that anymore. But again, it doesn't stop until we as moms start to have these conversations that we can now then share with our daughters, of course, age appropriate, but that we're open to having those conversations with them and who they are and who they are becoming, so they're not afraid of it anymore.
Yeah, because if we don't have those conversations, they will get misinformation from their peers. That's how they're gonna learn it. And Google does not have all the answers, you know? It's like,
Well,
no,
Google doesn't have
we
your
wanna teach
comfort
it in a
of,
way of wellness.
right. They're going to find the answers, but they don't have your support, your hand to listen to their thoughts as they're going through this. And that's really what this comes down to. And so we need to first be willing to have these conversations, so finding safe people to have it with, people like Virio, or in the Mama Genius Hub, or wherever it is with your friends, to start having those conversations so you're more comfortable with it before taking it to your younger kids and things like that, so that you have that awareness of even what to talk about. And we'll be back in just one moment, because we're going to talk about what should we talk about when we have those conversations. Attention mompreneurs, do you feel like you're constantly juggling the responsibilities without a moment to yourself? It's time to pause and reflect with our Mama Genius quiz. Tailored for busy mamas like you, this quiz will help you identify what's blocking your path and inspire you to harness your unique strengths, transform how you manage life and business, find your rhythm, and ignite your joy. Visit mamageniushub.com today to discover your Mama Genius. Again, that's mamageniushub.com. So I really want to dive in, Vero. Where should we start with having these conversations? What do you suggest so we can start being more open and understanding of what is happening with our body and how to have these either first with other moms or how to even have these with our daughters? You take it however you want.
I think one of the first ones is to use words that are real with our body parts. I just had a women's workshop just a few days ago, and I would say 90% of the women, their moms didn't even give them a word for their female genitals. There was no word. It was just down there. And the message that happens when we don't use a word is that body part is not important, or we should be ashamed about it. It doesn't matter. Like, it gives so much misinformation, right? So the first thing is to use the correct words. So often, my mother was an immigrant. English was not her first language. So she just went with the one that she used. But thankfully, she did use a word. So she used the word vagina. But vagina actually is a very scientific word that is about the vaginal canal. So it's actually not our female genitals on the outside. It's actually a part of our female genitals, which is the inside. So the word vagina is incorrect when we're referring to our female genitals. So one would be vulva. Vulva would be more what we see on the outside and our entire female genitals. And so use the correct word and say, I think most people, penis is usually not a big deal. Most people have used that word more, and it's often more about the female parts. Although for boys too, sometimes people don't use the proper word. So use the proper word. Don't make up silly names that, there's that just perpetuates the discomfort that, oh, we can't even use a proper word, right? So let's use the proper words. And the other word that I'll be talking about later today is the word yoni. Yoni is actually my favorite word. Yoni is Sanskrit for female genitals. It actually means sacred passage, cave of wonder. And the male body part is lingam, and it means wand of light. And for me, there's a sacredness with those words. So it brings this sacredness to it. If we treat our female genitals as a sacred passage, as a cave of wonder, then we're going to be more thinking and wondering before we let somebody enter, or as you're menstruating, I wish I would have known about options other than tampons. I mean, tampons, most of them, just the common ones you buy in the grocery store, are bleached, they're toxic. And for me as a young girl, excruciatingly painful. Putting a dry tampon into my body was awful. So my mom just told me to go look in the cupboard in the bathroom. That was it. That was my initiation into menstruation. So if your daughter isn't, menstruating yet, start to educate yourself so that you know how to have these conversations. And first of all, use the proper words. So vulva, yoni, great words to use. And then look at your own upbringing. What word did you have as a young girl? And if if English is not your maternal language, then look at what would be the appropriate word in your maternal language, and use that word. Because when we have a name, imagine as a human being, if we walk into a place and nobody cares about our name, we don't feel significant. We feel unimportant. We feel invisible, right? And so if we do that with our body part, that's not healthy. So name it. give her a name, and then you could even go to the point of giving her her own personal name, right? Like, 'cause she matters. Your own vulva, your own yoni, you could give her a name for herself. And so when we honor her as a sacred passage, we start to have a relationship, right? Have a relationship with your yoni, with your vulva. I didn't have a relationship with her for decades because I had learned to survive. I left my body. So have a relationship. Don't just do things to her, put things in her, take, like have a relationship. So yeah, that would be my big one is have a relationship, build a relationship, get to know her, get to know what she likes. Because as young girls, it's normal to start to have hormones and not know what to do with those. So rather than going looking outside of yourself as your daughter, like when I was 10, and as you become a teenager, and we have these hormones that are going on, they're real, right? So rather than having to look outside of ourselves to fulfill that, when we know our own bodies as a temple and we treat our yoni as a sacred passage, a cave of wonder, then I get to be sovereign. I get to know this body. I believe that as a young girl, as a teen, if I would have known my own body and how to take care of my own needs and how to self-pleasure without shame. So that's what we're gonna be talking about doing more this afternoon. I've got a gift later today to dissolve the shame. Then we're less likely to get involved in an unhealthy sexual relationship when we're really not ready and perhaps become pregnant and all the possibilities there, right? Or a STD or any of those. If we're, as a young girl, sovereign in our own bodies and we know our own bodies and we know how to self-pleasure, then we don't end up in big messes that are harder to clean, right? We end up just, understanding our own body and knowing we are sexual beings. So you are gonna have, you are gonna be aroused. People use the word horny. You are gonna be aroused. You're gonna have hormones. You're gonna have this attraction going on with, with another, whether it's lesbian, same sex, opposite sex, you're going to have hormones. It is normal. Teenagers have hormones. Let's give our young girls and young boys um, an understanding of their own bodies so they can take care of their own needs without shame, that they can self pleasure, that they can touch themselves, they can masturbate without shame. And if you've got shame yourself, you got to start to dissolve some of yours because otherwise, when you have the conversation, we know that as parents, it's not just what we say, it's how we feel about it, our tone of voice, our own beliefs. So you've got to, get support for yourself so that you can dissolve the shame yourself, so
I
that you
think
can
that
become
that is so true, just in terms of how we have those conversations and talk about it, and giving them that knowledge of because you're right, the hormones are there. So do you want them in relationships that aren't necessarily good for them, or for them to be able to choose partners that they truly want to be around versus just being attracted by the hormones? And so when we're having those conversations, but again, I look back, I was thinking as you were talking, I think back to where the shame comes from, and then we think about some of the roots of society and those things. And so it stems from somewhere along the way, because I know when we look back at history, some of it wasn't there. And somewhere along the lines, we put shame around it. We put shame around sex. I mean, you look at some of the temples in India or some of the places, and it's all about sexual beings and everything. And somewhere we have that disconnect in there. And so it's now time for us to figure out, how do we reconnect that to have these conversations? Because having this kind of conversation is better than finding out later on, Mom, I'm pregnant. When you're not, that conversation can be a heck of a lot harder.
yeah, Mom, I'm pregnant, or Mom, I was just raped, right?
Yes.
Or do they even
Yeah.
would they even feel comfortable coming to say that, to speak that, right? Um, those violations. So yeah, it's so important to be able to have that healthy conversation. And just like we were talking about fears earlier, yeah, there might be fear around it, discomfort, like, I don't want to have this conversation with my son or daughter. Yeah, we need to have it. Easier to have it preventative than to have it in a crisis zone, pregnant, raped, all of those other possibilities. Let's have the conversations, even if they're uncomfortable. Get some support, which is why I love that you've got the Mama Genius, that you've got the hub, because we need support as moms. We need support as women. We cannot do this alone. So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Virio. We're going to go into our final question for you for today, and I just I still have not got it in my brain yet. As it's I'm always changing the last part of the podcast, but I want to get this advice from all of our speakers. But what is a common misconception about motherhood you think holds many moms back from truly stepping into their genius?
Oh, for me, the number one is that we should put our kids' husbands, partners first.
So how do we shift that mindset then?
Yeah. And that's not necessarily an easy one at first, because it's literally, we're inundated. And I remember this as a mom when my sons were younger. We get celebrated if we stay up till stupid o'clock. We bake the cookies. We're on the committee. We do all these things. We're like, whoa, isn't she amazing? You will not get celebrated if you say, I went to bed early. I'm not coming to the meeting and I didn't bake any cookies. So a big piece of that is some shame busting and redefining self-care. That's one of the gifts I have later, is dissolving the shame. So now, as an adult grown woman, grandma, 62, when because people actually call me selfish now, they're like, oh, you're so selfish. So like, I didn't take part of this right away because I needed to pull back and take care of Virio. I put myself first. It still requires some process for me to do that. Um, and so some people have actually called me selfish. And what I actually say now is I say, thank you. And they're like, what? I say, thank you. That's evidence that I am way better at self-care now.
Yeah.
So, and it's, get some support around that. In the Women in Our Pleasure program, we do some shame busting around judgment, of fear of being labeled as selfish, and fear of judgment from others. And at the end of the day, it's like, Brené Brown is brilliant. She talks about this, that we don't want to betray our own souls. So you must be willing to betray another so
Yeah.
that you don't betray yourself. I think that's also in Araya Dreamer's, her poem, The Invitation. And I'm willing now to betray, Michelle was reaching out to me many times, like, where are you at, Virio? How can I support you? Are you joining? And I was like, I just couldn't at those points, right? Until today. Um, so learning to put yourself first, get some support, do some shame busting. We have a shame busting tool in our pleasure program, and that I'll be sharing later today, so that you care more about yourself, about filling yourself up. Because the reality is, when you get sick or something happens to you, you are no good to your children, you're no good to your partner if you've got a partner. And
Yeah.
what a beautiful way, model. I love you, and it's a no. I love you, I'm going to bed. I love you, it's a no, I'm gonna go rest. I love you, I'd love to do it, I just can't. I'm gonna go rest. I love you, I just can't. I'm gonna go take a bath. I love you, I just can't. I'm gonna go dance tonight so I can fill myself up. So you take whatever it is that fills you up, like, make a list. What are the things that when you do them, you are filled up, you
Mm.
fill your cup. And then do some shame busting, dissolve the shame around it, so that you can model that to your children too, especially to the girls. We are taught as girls that we're supposed to give, you know, and that's what we're modeling, right? You give to your community, to your church, to the school, to your neighbors, to your parents, to your to your husband, to everybody else, right? And the reality is that that pattern needs to stop, like, completely stop. I mean, I completely burned myself out more than once. Or we give, if you have a day job, more than just caregiving, which as a mom, it's 24/7. If you also work outside of the home, learning to set some boundaries there too. It's like, no, I'm not going to stay and work till whatever time. So starting to really put yourself first, clear the shame, so that you can fill yourself up first, unapologetically.
On that note, Vera, tell everyone how they can get a hold of you. And actually, if you would give your free guest for the podcast audience as well right now, because some people might be listening to this later on outside the festival.
Yeah. So my gift is the Shame Busting Guide, and it is a 13-page document that I have my labor of love over the last 7 years that has supported me in dissolving the shame, especially. Let me just kind of backtrack a bit. Right now on the planet, the stats actually show that 91% of women are unhappy with their bodies. So we don't have confidence in our bodies. And when we're not confident in our own bodies, we won't end up putting ourselves first. We'll end up putting everybody else first. So the Shame Busting Guide is a 13-page document, and it's going to walk you through. Perhaps some of you have got body hatred, you've got criticism around body parts, you don't feel confident naked in front of the mirror, or maybe if you're with a partner, you want the lights out. So it's actually going to walk you through. It's like me holding your hand. And this is what I used for myself and the women in our pleasure program. I walk you through step by step through the 7 steps and take you to a place where you will be able to value your body as important. You'll be able to see your body as valuable. And some of you, you're already acknowledge your body and you'll be able to move to the next level. So some of you, it's like, I don't feel beautiful when I look at myself naked in front of the mirror. That's okay. We're going to take you where you are to the next best place. And it's a whole workbook. You work through each step, write it down, get support, and then come to a place of being able to honor your own body, honor your own temple, to recognize how important it is. So that's the first step. So that's my gift for you, so that you can start to feel confident in your own body and start to eventually feel confident buck naked in front of the mirror, because your confidence impacts everything. And when we as women have body confidence, we can talk about things better. We're confident communicating. We manage money better. We attract more money. Like, it impacts our confidence, impacts everything. Confidence impacts how we parent our children, how we show up in the community. Like, it's everything. When we can walk and feel comfortable in our own skin, we can walk in and be relaxed instead of contracted in a space. Like, it impacts everything in our lives as women when we're not confident. So it's going to give you confidence.
I
Okay.
love
It's
it.
going to start to give you confidence. And here's a light shining in on me right now. See if I can close that a
So
bit. There we
everyone,
go.
the link will be in the show notes, and go ahead and download that right away and get working with that. And then if get hold of Virio if you want to go into her pleasure program as well. And we're going to take her off for the moment to give our 5 takeaways from today's talk. And so, what an amazing conversation that we just had, and really opening up that idea. First of all, first takeaway is that as women, we always put everyone else first, that we're taking away our own needs. And we're trying to show you that it's time to say no, that no is a complete sentence, and do those things first. But then she leads us into number 2, where we need to start redefining what sex is for us, that sex can be self-care, it can be nourishing. And she goes through the 3 ideas of 3 ways that divorce happens. Number 6 is lack of intimacy. And I believe it was number 3 where she said it was communication. But then number 1 is infidelity. So when you're not taking care of the other 2, that's going to lead to a lot of those divorces when we're not having those conversations. Which then leads us into takeaway to number 3. It's time to get past some of that fear and shame. And actually, she gave us a great free gift that we can use to help us do that, to reconnect with our bodies instead of feeling that disconnect, and start to know your own body and feel safe in your body instead of that cycle of discomfort, and to start having those conversations first with peers and maybe spouses, then trickling it down to our kids once we feel that comfort and release some of that shame. And that leads us to number 4, which is actually use words that are real. So she was using the words like vulva and yoni. I love that word yoni, and talking about the sacred passage and the cave of wonder. I mean, when you start to picture all of that, you start to see it in a different way. And then to give other options besides tampons, and to learn how to care for our own bodies and to give it a name. Which then leads us into the last one, number 5, which is actually having a relationship, getting to know your own body, your own temple, and self-pleasuring without shame, and teaching that method, because those hormones are going to come up, especially for our teenage kids when we don't have those conversations. Do we want them to find out that information from somewhere else? Or do we want to know that we're a place that we can have those conversations? Even as uncomfortable as they are, we still know that when we're open to having those conversations, they're going to come to us with their fears and things that are coming before us. So Virio, did I miss anything, or what's your final takeaway for us?
You got it all. That was amazing. Um, my final takeaway is deepening that relationship, not just with your genitals, but actually with this body. Um, there was a time when I looked in front of the mirror, the self-talk was not very nice. It was, I would never talk to my friend that way. I would never say the things that were going on in my head. So my gift that I have is going to support you with that. You can use that as well for shifting the negative self-talk into positive, kind self-talk. So start to talk to yourself, because here's the reality. You are with yourself 24/7. So when this practice I actually did for 365 days, and now it's just a habit, like it's just normal for me. When I look in the mirror and I see myself and I see my reflection, I say something kind to Virio. When I notice that I say something unkind, like, "Ooh, you have a lot of wrinkles," or something, that's what I say now sometimes. The critic once in a while shows up for that. But when I notice something like that, I stop and I say, "Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry." I wouldn't say that to a friend, right? Like, "Wow, you're looking pretty wrinkly lately." I would never say that to a friend, right? So then I say, "I'm sorry." And then I look at myself and I say, I love your smile, Virio. I usually say for each negative self-talk, I say two compliments. So then I say, Virio, I love your smile. I love these colors on you and how you're showing up. Got the whole color thing going on today. So I would say something kind to myself, because we live with ourselves 24/7, and see if your self-talk can shift from that negative self-talk to speaking to yourself like you would to a dear friend who you adored. Speak that way.
I love that so much. And so with that, we will leave you for today, but to be kind to yourself and remember to be your own friend, because you have that genius inside of you. And the more you treat yourself that way, the more it's going to come forth. Thank you for joining us in today's episode of the Mama Genius Hub podcast. If you found value in our conversation, please share this episode with another mama who might benefit. Sharing helps us build a supportive community and reach out to more mamas like you. After all, it's more fun when we do motherhood together. Until next time, stay motivated and continue to pursue your dreams as you shine in your genius.